Hey there, welcome to the fourth episode of Fourth and Four. This is where I go over one theme each video. We talk about 4 fantasy football topics over that theme, and it should be in about 4 minutes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. This one is going to be about the COVID impact on your fantasy football season. So I'm going to talk about 4 different topics about COVID and how it impacts your fantasy football season. First, opt-outs. As you might have seen my post yesterday, we had our first real big opt-out for fantasy football, and that was Damian Williams. This opens up a huge role for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you remember back from my first episode, I talked about how big of a role it could be for if Clyde Edwards-Helaire ended up being the main guy there. Now it seems like he's going to be the main guy there. And remember, they topped over 1,900 total yards, the running backs, the last 2 years in Kansas City, and they had over 15 touchdowns in each of the last 2 years in Kansas City for total of the running backs, and it looks like he's slotted to be the workhorse there. Again, that's the first big opt-out. There really hasn't been many other ones. A couple that are worth mentioning are Devin Funchess and Marquise Goodwin. Those are just taking away some weapons for both Aaron Rodgers and Carson Wentz. Nothing huge impact, but they are additional things that both of those teams went out and got this offseason. And make sure you pay attention to see if any other opt-outs come on. Next is the rookies. So outside of Edwards-Helaire, because it looks like he's got the starting role, this is going to be a huge impact on the other rookies for both running backs and wide receivers for fantasy football. There's going to be a limited training camp, very few practices, no preseason. This is huge for those rookies. They don't get to prove to the coaches in games or in scrimmages that they can take on like pass blocking or they have good route running. It's going to be tough for these rookies to really establish themselves, and it might take till like mid-season for either the running backs or receivers to really get involved in the offense. So I took like Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, all those rookie running backs. I dropped them a bit yesterday in my rankings. You can check those out. And I never had anybody ranked in the top 40 as a rookie wide receiver in my half PPR rankings, but this basically solidified that I'm not going to be taking rookie receivers unless one happens to fall to a good spot and I can put them on my bench. But next is familiar offensive players with their schemes, their personnel. So like basically what I'm talking about is I believe that the teams that have quarterbacks that have played in the same system and played with the same familiar coaches and players, those guys will have a big advantage at the beginning of the season, if not the whole season. So 4 teams I like because of this are obviously the Chiefs. They're huge for fantasy anyways. The Saints, the Seahawks, and the Rams. There's so many fantasy options on these teams. And what I like to do with this is, if I'm going into my draft and I have 2 like players, if one of them plays for these 4 teams, I think that's a good tiebreaker that you can use to differentiate them over another similar guy, but that maybe plays with a rookie quarterback or a new coach. I think you use this as like a tiebreaker there. And lastly, COVID adjustments for your leagues. We all are dealing with COVID. This is no different. COVID's going to affect your fantasy football leagues no matter what. And we don't know who's going to get it, who won't, how long the season will be. You have to decide with your league mates all the potential outcomes. So you have to sit down, get it in writing. My recommendation would be to add bench spots or IR spots to increase your roster size, because there are going to be cases that knock players out. Teams shouldn't necessarily have to drop them. They should be able to keep them on their team and go pick up somebody else. So extend your roster. It's up to you how you want to do it. Also, you will need to figure out the money component. You're going to have to figure out if the season ends at X week, do we just give everybody their money back? Do we pay to the guys in first record-wise? You're going to have to figure out all these details. They need to be figured out before the season starts. So not during the season. You don't want somebody get 2 players with COVID and they're like, I want my money back. That needs to be in writing before the season starts. So every league's different. I can't really give you a uniform recommendation, but I do know that you must get all this ironed out before the season starts, and it would probably be better to get it all ironed out before you draft. Thanks again. See you next time.